All right, my name's Monique. I'm Jamaican. I grew up in Jamaica. I grew up watching people on the school grounds play cricket, see my cousins playing cricket on the road. I've always loved cricket, and it's just nice seeing people play outside. Like, I haven't seen cricket being played outside in a couple of years, so when I saw people playing in the park, I had to stop and watch.
So thank you, Anansi. And here we are recapping what has been a very good tournament put on by the New York National League called the Guyana Cup, the Milton Paidana Cup, which saw the Sharks winning a Triple Crown in 2025. Lots of points to talk about. We'll review the two semifinals. We'll review the finals, and we'll look back at what promises or promised to be one of the better tournaments around. Got alongside me Carl Bennett and Matthew Achaibar. We're going to bring you in Carl Bennett first. Carl, what's your impression on the Guyana Cup in 2025?
Yeah, I thought the Guyana Cup was perhaps the best it's been since the inception. I thought the introduction of the overseas player element, that international flair, elevated the interest. It brought up the level of the cricket that was played. And I thought, all in all, just even the strong performance of the overseas players in the semifinals and in the final. In fact, one player in particular actually ended up copping not only the MVP, but the best wicketkeeper of the final, as well as the best batter. And so I thought it really brought out a strong element and can only allow the Guyana Cup to grow from strength to strength.
All right. Thank you very much, Carl Bennett. I got Matthew Achaibar, who's been quite involved in this year's Guyana Cup. Matt, what's your take on especially the last day, two semifinals and the big final?
Yeah, it was certainly an action-packed day of cricket. We saw action in the morning at the Baisley Pond Park and then action at Drew Park. And it ended up being quite an interesting day because we had the two number one seeded teams that had drawn by after Sunday afternoon. We saw the Barbados Lions and Essequibo Jaguars, who were given that extra bit of rest, and they were both ironically defeated by the Demerara Eagles and Queens Sharks. Sharks ended up going on to win the three-peat. So yeah, it was a very, very interesting day when you consider where the table and where the standings stood after Sunday afternoon compared to how the results ended up playing out on Monday morning.
All right, so we go straight to the couple of semifinals, and we're going to talk about first of all the semifinal that involved the Essequibo Jaguars and the Demerara Eagles. A pretty low scoring affair, guys. And Matt, walk us through what happened early, and then we'll talk about the reply with Carl Bennett.
Yeah, and Drew Park has certainly had a bit of a pattern. It hasn't been the most batting-friendly surface, but certainly the Essequibo Jaguars would feel they ended up falling well short. Tristan Coleman and Abdullah Saeed were two members. Again, we go back to the overseas talent, two guys that really elevated this Essequibo Jaguar side. Both of them fell rather early. Coleman for 4, Abdullah for 11. The captain Nicholas Chinku and David Lachaya mounted a fight back, but once again, they had to contend with some very good bowling performances by the Demerara Eagles. We saw Fuse Aziz picking up 3 for 14, was really the pick of the bowler. So 117. Not the highest of scores, but at Drew Park, you've got to believe, you've got to feel your bowlers can go ahead and back that up. Unfortunately, wasn't quite the case. The Demerara Eagles weathered the storm a bit. They lost Sangalima, Derek Narayan, Wakas Ali early, but then Chandrapal Hemraj, as he did throughout most of the competition, got a substantial knock, 41. Vidan Paul and Wasim Haslam played some good hands as well, and it saw the Demerara Eagles through.
Yes, Carl Bennett, you were following the chase quite interestingly. Tell us what you make of the Demerara reply to a very paltry score.
Yeah, I thought that they clearly struggled a bit, and the Essequibo Jaguars, you can't underestimate the fight of the Jaguars. They did bowl well early on. Keith Eddy picking up wickets, and while they lost early wickets, while Demerara lost early wickets, to Matt's point, the performance from Chandrapal Hemraj in terms of shepherding the chase, supported by Wasim Haslam, only underscored like how much fight Demerara Eagles have in them. So even when they're under the gun, when they're under pressure, they find ways to kind of get wins. They eke out what we call ugly wins sometimes, but as the saying goes, an ugly win is better than a pretty loss, and they've found a way to weather the storm, particularly in the middle order, and were able to get over the line really in 18.4 overs. So that chase, even though they were only chasing 117, that chase took them all the way to the very end, and they eventually got there.
Yeah, Chandrapal Hemraj, as you know, Carl, in this series, batted in the middle, batted at 4, batted at 5, and it's a position I thought, looking back in this year's Guyana Cup, he really bat with so much responsibility. And when you bat, there are two things you'd understand about T20 cricket. When you bat at the top of the order, it requires a different role. When you bat in the middle, it requires a different role. The top of the order, Sangalima, Derek Narain, their job is to see what they can get quickly out of the blocks in the first 6 overs. So there comes the big aggressive shot, the over-the-top shots, and that kind of sort. Of course, you'll need decent wicket to do that. We saw Drew Park, as Matt mentioned, not one of the best plays to probably to bolster the playing style of Sangalima, Derek Narai, Wasim Haslam, Waqas Ali, and even Chandrapal Hemraj, leading up to this semi-final, was really batting good at number 4, number 5. When you bat at 4 at number 5, you control things a lot better than when you bat at the top. He's always been an explosive batter at the top of the order. Chandrapal Hemraj, having played CPL and batted opening the batting, but that middle order slot belonged to him up until this stage, and he made 41 very important runs. And the previous day, he had made runs again against the Raptors, got the Demerara Eagles to 173 in that game. The very next day, they made 201. So they were really scoring runs up until this Essequibo game, in which they struggled a bit, but Chandrapal Hemraj brought it home. He controlled things from the middle. Matt, how do you see Hemraj's performance this year?
Yeah, I think that's the kind of role you want from your experience, your star players. A guy like Chandrapal Hemraj, who, as we mentioned, has played at the CPL level, coming here to the Guyana Cup. I think this is really the type of role we should expect from Chandrapal Hemraj. Maybe not. I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, still he's very explosive at the top, but I've been saying this for maybe the last few years now. Even when he was still at the CPL circuit, I felt Chandrapal Hemraj was a guy that, especially when he comes to New York, is a guy that I think can really command that number 4 position. He's a guy that has shots and can pretty much play at any stage of the game. So I'm glad to see Hemraj shifting down a bit. And yeah, I think he definitely lived up to expectations.
Yeah, Avi Danpal in that semi-final made 29. So along with Chandrapal Hemraj, the experience of Avi Danpal, and when you look at Avi Danpal, in this series, along with the the Demerara Eagles, batted way below where he usually goes. He's a top order player, but he has had to go 7 and 8 a few times. But hey, it is the game. You make runs anywhere when you can bat. All right.
Yeah. So, the one thing I'll add to that as well, Len, is in talking to a few of the players after the final.
Yeah.
They were sort of complaining a bit about where they kind of ended up in the batting order. Some of these batters were usually top order batters, were forced to bat down at 6 and 7, and so they felt a little bit out of their element batting so low. And so when we talk about how Chandrapal Hemraj performed, I think there was sort of an over-reliance on him being where he was and how much he was contributing. And I think that may have taken away from some of the effort and the actual performance of players like Avi Danpal, Chris Patterson, that were forced to come lower down. And we'll talk about the final, because in the final, they tried to change the batting order a bit to move some of those players up in the order to see if they could get more production. And in the end, that didn't work out so well as well. So, so that was also an element that we can't really overlook.
Yeah, and the other thing, when one made runs, the others fail. When the others fail, somebody stood up. So in T20 cricket, if you're top order, doesn't really give you a good start, and you're batting at 3 for 15 and just the fourth over, fifth over, you know the middle order A will have to somehow come up with a plan to bat through, and B, come up with some sort of runs to put on the table. And they struggled in that regard. All right, so let's go to the second semi-final. And everybody was looking up to this billing. It was the Berbice Lions on paper, one of the stronger team. We talked about them in the general preview before the tournament started, and we talked about the Berbice Lions having footprints of the ACS, and we know how ACS has done over 15, 20 years in New York City. They know how to win. So with this team, you probably thought that the team that wins this semi-final was probably going to win this competition. Queen Sharks, they take on Berbice Lion. Carl, what do you make of how things went earlier on, realizing that Queen Shark was sent in? And by the way, teams opting to bowl last has been a popular toss decision by the captains out in the middle.
Yeah. And on this occasion, Queen Sharks actually, they lost the toss and were inserted, right? And it turned out that they actually, got off to a reasonable start. It wasn't explosive by any means. Dominic Rickey and Hamza Beg at the top put on a good opening stand, got them to, about 46 on the board before the first wicket fell. Yeah. And they got good support at the top. And so while they didn't put a ton of runs on the board, they ultimately ended up with Talha Mumtaz coming in and getting almost a runner ball. In fact, better than runner ball 40. Yeah. And then some support here and there from Himrinja Ramdahal, Bisram, and Kiran Sunarayan. They actually were able to get to what I thought was a competitive total of 153. I didn't necessarily think that it would stand up, again, because Berbice Lions are a strong team, a strong batting lineup from top to bottom. I didn't really think 153 would have been enough. And somehow they found a way to not only come out and show the fighting spirit of Queen Sharks, but found a way to defend that 153.
Matt, they started off, they were going 6-7 runs and over. But when they got past that 12th over, you saw a different approach.
Yeah, and the Queen Sharks, it's really a testament as to how important conserving wickets are, because we saw Dominic Rickey and Hamza Beg, as we mentioned, 5-6 runs, not too much, 5-6 runs and over, not too much to really talk about. But when you think about it, they put on a massive opening stand, 46 for the opening partnership. The second wicket fell at 107 in the 15th over. That was Talha Mumtaz. So the top three really did a good job in keeping the scoreboard ticking, getting those 5-6 and over, getting the big shots in between from Dominic Rickey, Talha Mumtaz, and managing to not get out. And we saw how important, when you're in the 15th over and you have 8 wickets in hand, and some of those 8 wickets include Hemendra Ramdihal, Lachman Bisram, Kiran Sunarayan, Micah Sultan, Trevor Henry, a batting lineup that seemingly never ended. It gave everybody on that team, after the wicket of Mumtaz, it gave every single person that was coming next on that team a free license to go. And because of that, we saw a lot of runouts. We saw 5 runouts in one innings. But again, at that stage of the game, you have wickets in hand. You have wickets to play with. You can take those quick singles. You can run for 2 no matter what. You can play any shot you want, knowing that you've got a batting lineup that goes all the way to 11, and you've got 7, 8, 9 wickets in hand. So late in the innings. So it was really a very good start from the Queen Sharks, and I think a well-paced innings as well.
Yeah, I was looking at some very low projection, and I saw they were projected to go like 135. So that 20 or 30 more runs, Matt, towards the end really spurred them on. The confidence was there that they can defend 153. And not that the Lions bowled bad. The running was good. They picked it up a little bit. And like you mentioned, they had so much wicket in hand that they had to fire off towards the end. A lot of runs were scored in the last 8 or 5 overs. Anthony Adams picked up a couple of wickets. Deveshwari Prasad went for 1 for 30 off his 4. And all of a sudden, Carl, 150 was always going to be an interesting target for the Lions.
Yeah, it was, and just to come back to just having wickets in hand. Another statistic that you could look at to tell that that batters in the middle had like free license is the strike rate that they had. Kieran Ryan, 200 strike rate. He only faced 6 balls.
Yeah.
He scored 12 runs. Bisram, he also scored 12, and he only faced 8 balls. So guys really had the opportunity to swing for the fences, and that also underscored just how well the middle order supported the foundation that had been laid by Ricky, Big, and Tala Mumtaz in the end.
All right, so out came Akshay Hamraj. And Akshay Hamraj, we all know he's one of the exciting young players, scores very quickly, plays all the shot, very liberal. And he got them off to a flyer, Matt.
Yeah, Akshay Hamraj, going back to Carl's point, initially 153, probably not holding up with this Barbies team. Akshay Hamraj was certainly affirming that belief, it seemed, throughout the first couple of overs. Slammed 33 off 25, 3 fours, 2 sixes, took the fight right away. And for those couple of overs, some ominous signs were ahead for the Queen Sharks, and it looked as if Akshay Hamraj was primed to have a big game ahead of him.
Carl, they got rid of Kiran Krishna quite early, but out came Kwame Patan Jr., and the pace was picked up again.
Yeah, Kwame came in and batted well in partnership with Akshay. And look, we have talked about Akshay over the years. Just he is a diminutive player, small player, but a very classy player. When he's in form, he looks the part. He looks a top class player, and he was smashing it all around and was batting real well. And I thought he got out in an unfortunate way, but it was an important breakthrough when he fell, and then the game was sort of ebbing and flowing in the middle. Kwame Patan in the partnership with Akshay. Akshay actually fell right after Kiran Krishna went. And so, when it comes down to it, that middle order that where Patan, Devashara Prasad fell in quick succession, it was Ray Ramratan and then Bhaskar Yadram who actually had to come and sort of rebuild that middle order to kind of restore some semblance of, all right, we're in a real run chase. We truly have an opportunity to go get this 153. And then they sort of swung the balance back towards Berbice in a sense. That made it look like Berbice was well on their way until, some later fireworks took place.
Yeah, once the ball was thrown to Michael Sultan, Matt, he became the man with the golden arm.
Yeah, right away, Michael Sultan,
The first ball.
And I believe he did that in the final as well. Came in first ball and got a wicket.
He got Derek Narayan in the final.
Yeah, and he got Akshay Hamraj as well with really not one of his best balls.
Yeah.
Michael Sultan, he bowled a low full toss. It was there to be hit. Hamraj went for it and managed to pick out Dominic Ricky, who was also everywhere in the field. Side note, Dominic Ricky was probably the best fielder of the day's play. But that wicket of Hamraj pretty much set the tone for Michael Sultan, even if it wasn't his best ball. He went on to get the wicket of Kwame Patan and Devish Rai Prasad, 3 for 20 from his 4 overs.
And hold on. And so you've thrown the ball to Michael Sultan. He's made an early inroads. Mm-hmm. They've still got some runs to play with, but the captain takes the ball and gets a wicket first ball.
Yeah. Karen Suryanarayan stepped right up. And leading from in front, he comes in and he makes an immediate impression, removing the very important Bhaskar Yadram. And it's one thing to talk about just being a captain and leading from the front, but Suryanarayan he seemed to always have belief. And I interviewed him at the end of the final. And just kind of ask him, just in the way he talked about how he uses the players, how he relies on the experience that's in the team to kind of help him to be a better captain. He also stepped up, showed that he can deliver himself, leading by example, and he came in and delivered a very important blow that I think had a lot to do with the outcome in the end.
Bhaskar batted at 6. How important as a fielding unit, guys, when you know you've got one of the best all-rounder around here, we know that Bhaskar has all the numbers to tell you that. He's batting at 6. You're out in the field. Every time a wicket falls, you watch to the players' pavilion to see if Bhaskar Yadram is coming. Does that delay the suspense, Carl, that he's coming till at 6? And until he comes and he goes, we can breathe easy.
Yeah, it's a psychological thing, Len. You and I, we've always talked about this in the case of like a Chris Gayle at the international level. Once people realize that this guy is still there, in the back of your mind, it's like going to bed worrying that something, there's danger out there. And so people cannot rest easy knowing that this guy is still here and he by himself can kind of take the game away from you. And so therein lies the importance of a Yadram, the psychological impact that he can have on a fielding unit once they realize this guy's still here. And so in your mind, when you're coming up with a plan, you either have to come up with a plan that neutralizes what he can do, the damage that he can do. So either try to keep him off strike and take focus on the other batters around him, or when you have him on strike, figure out a way to contain him the best you can, because as destructive as he is and as experienced as he is, he's likely to sort of snatch the game away from you.
So, Matt, Bhaskar Yadram comes out. Among the many shots he's played, couple of 6s, couple of 4s. Worry for Queen's Shark. What happens next?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think almost everyone on this Barbies team, well, at least everybody on the Barbies middle order, I'm sure would look back and really want to have another opportunity to win this game. From Devish Rai Prashad, maybe even all the way down to Akeem Diwar, everybody on this team would probably look back at the way they got out and say, I should not have maybe gotten out that way. Devish Rai Prashad got out in almost identical fashion to Akshay Humraj. It was a low full toss for Michael Sultan, once again looking for that slug sweep, and once again picked out Dominic Ricky right in front of us. I'm sure maybe 4th ball into his innings, Devish Rai Prashad will say, a little bit more to the left or right of Dominic Ricky, I would have been in business. Or
another ground.
Maybe if I didn't play that shot, or maybe if it was on another ground, I would have continued to fight on. Raymond Ramratan was also run out, looking to take quick runs, took on the arm of Lachman Bisram, lost that battle. So he was certainly one that added to the amount of runouts we saw in this game. Bhaskar Yadram, Karan Ganesh as well. Speaking to Karan Ganesh, he himself was one that was very livid with himself. Especially with the equation being just about a run a ball. And we know Karan Ganesh, that's the type of game Karan Ganesh loves to play. Went for a big shot, picked out Hemendra Ramdihal. Yadram did the same thing, maybe looking to finish the game, looking to bring it down. And in fairness to Bhaskar Yadram, the way he was striking it, the way he was going, and just the fact that it is Bhaskar Yadram, you've got to back him, and he's got to back himself to play those shots. Unfortunately for him, it didn't come off. Once again, he also picked out Ramdihal. And at that point, it got to the stage where you felt the Barbies Lions were beginning to lose their way and the Sharks were getting themselves back into the game. Even Akeem Diwar, with around 9 needed in the final over, looking for that big shot, first ball of the over off of Kellen Carmichael, even maybe him will probably have some sort of regret going for that big glory shot right away. But yeah, I think it was a series of dismissals that nobody on the Barbies Lions team will be proud of.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to Len to that is because only 153, you always feel as the team chasing that even if I don't do it, there's another guy behind me that will come and do it. And so in that sense, I think it gave these guys the license to continue to try to hit for the fences. And, along the way, they sort of, even on bad balls that they normally would put away, some of those were going to hand. The one that did go to Dominic Ricky. Matt made the point about Karan Ganesh. I mean, he was kicking himself in terms of falling the way he did and the time that he did. And so you always felt like, even as wickets were falling, the talent and the experience was still there with the Barbies Lions, that they would have found a way to kind of turn the table, so to speak. But we were talking about it on commentary, where sometimes you just have a team that you can't beat, is sort of your bogey team. And I think for Barbies Lions, the Queen Shark is just that team that they can't find a way to actually get by.
Yeah, and look, I thought Karan Sinarain at this stage of the game really marshaled his troop pretty well and put the personnel in the right place. Look, it's not typical that you'll see a captain in the latter stages of the game, or almost at the last over, go all the way out to long on. Usually the captain wants to stay around the circle just to think, but he knows that if a ball goes that distance, he or Dominic Rickey wants to be in position to take that catch.
Yeah.
And he lined himself up. Even the catches that Dominic Rickey took, they were catches that he was placed there to do that.
Yeah.
They depended on him. They know anything that goes in the air in Ricky's direction will be snapped up. And that's the exact thing with Karan Sinarain. Now, that shot from Hakeem Diwar, if he had floored that catch, he was almost on the brink of the bunker. If that had gone for 6, it was game over.
Yeah.
But he held on.
I think Hakeem was looking to win it right then and there, just to deal that death blow, and it just didn't work out in that situation. And look, Hakeem was batting really well at that point. I mean, he came out and was middling the ball, square. He hit 1-6 early in his innings, and he seemed to be middling the ball so he had all the confidence that, hey, I can take this, I can take on this ball and I can take it out of the park. And it just didn't come off. And it's just one of those things in cricket where on a different day, it's a different result, and Berbice would likely go on to win the game.
And look, and even if he got dismissed for his ball, 5 ball to get 9 runs, Matt. Yeah. There's still some life here. Anthony Adams, Arvind Gangadin, and then of course we saw Amarnath Prasad. Still, you never know. Look, I pointed out to both of you guys while we were on a comm, there was nobody at third man, nobody at fine leg. Any ball that strictly got past the keeper would have run away.
Yeah. Well, one other point too, Len, that came out in sort of the post-match conversations with the team, with the teams, and with some of the individual players, particularly on the Berbice Lions, they were pointing out that just over the course of the tournament, they were never really in that position. Arvind Gangadin, Amarnath Prasad, where they had to try to come up with quick runs or in a pinch where they needed to kind of dig their team out. So they really weren't match ready, or they didn't fit the situation that was presented at that moment, and they just weren't ready for the moment. And this is where we talk about which team kind of stands up in a clutch situation and delivers. And Gangadin, Arvind and Amarnath Prasad, Amarnath in particular, struggled at the end, and he just felt that he was put into a position that he could not have helped the team to succeed.
All right, let's talk about Kellon Carmichael. Throwing the ball, Matt. Got to defend 9.
Yeah, and right away made an impact. Hakeem Diwar looking for the big shot, picking out the captain, Karan Sinarain, and then went on to take the wicket of Anthony Adams later in that over. So what a brilliant final over from Kellon Carmichael, and brilliant bowling figures as well. 3 for 16 from his 3 overs for a guy that didn't play in the previous day on Sunday, wasn't part of the lineup, came in Monday morning for the semi-final and final, and what a way to assert yourself in the team.
Well, the elimination continued, and it was the Berbice Lions this time taking a walk from the tournament. Queen's Sharks got closer to that covetous Triple Crown, and here they were to reach the Demerara Eagle. Carl, let's talk about the toss. Big loss for Demerara Eagles at the toss.
Yeah, I think, look, in talking to both captains right at the top, I asked them both, like, if you want to, well, obviously, the Queen Sharks won the toss and they elected to field first. But in talking to the Demerara Eagles and to Derek Narayan, he said, like, had they won the toss, they would have wanted to bowl first as well. And this is that you talked about the fact that this has been sort of a regular option for teams. When they win the toss, they prefer to bowl and know exactly what they have to chase. I thought it was an important toss. It was an important toss, particularly for the Demerara Eagles, only because I didn't get the impression that they were fully fit. They were, players had some niggles, throughout. coming into the final. I also thought that they were struggling a bit with their batting order, like, who was where. They had moved up. We discovered that they ultimately moved up a couple people in their batting order, moving Patidin as an example up to number 3, moving Wakasa around. Chandrapal Hemraj batted where he normally would. Wasim Haslim was moved down in the order. So they tried to tinker a bit, and it just wasn't coming. I mean, they got off to a reasonably good start. The first, they lost Shiv Sangalima early and patted in early as well. But, in saying that, they were still scoring at roughly 6 runs and over in that range. So again, it didn't seem like it was out of sorts, because we kind of felt that even though Sangalima was back in the hut, Patidin was back in the hut, and then ultimately Derek Narayan, you felt that with Chandrapal Hemraj still there, and he has been rescuing them all along, that he would sort of come and kind of help them to a healthy total. And it just didn't happen for the Demerara Eagles.
Yeah, even Derek Narayan, he's been lean, but you know a big one is coming somewhere along the line. You were hoping if it comes at the final. And by the way, let me just stick a pin here. By then, Demerara Eagles had only played one time at Baisley Pond Park. They made 173. They were chasing on that occasion against the Raptors. On the other hand, the Sharks have been quite resident at the pond. It's unavoidable because that's how the fixture was set up. They were taking on the top seed, Berbice Lions, that was slated to play. The top seed was always going to get the championship pitch. So Queen Shark ended up playing there in the semifinal. They ended up playing there in the Sunday afternoon eliminator, in which they won. So they've been at the pond for some time. Eagles, on the other hand, spent a lot of time at Drew Park in the latter stages of the competition. I wonder, Matt, how did that play out in the whole coming into this final feel?
Yeah, maybe just messed with the mindset, I guess, of the Demerara Eagles coming from a Drew Park pitch was probably 120, 130 about par to maybe more 150, 160 even par at Baisley. And it can do some certain things, especially, again, when the top order doesn't fire. Sangalima, Patidin, Derek Narayan, it can kind of get you into that mentality that 120 can probably win you a game here, but in reality at the Baisley Pond Park, you got to maybe aim 20, 30 runs higher than that. But again, going back to the batting order, I think it was just a simple batting failure by the Demerara Eagles. Patidin going in at number 3 was certainly... Patidin and Wasim Haslim in essence switched positions. Patidin was at 3, Haslim was at 6. It was usually the other way around throughout the tournament. I think that was certainly a strange decision considering Patidin had been very valuable lower in the order and had saved them, as we mentioned, with Chandrapal Hemraj. Patidin and Avi Danpal had also played a big part in that lower down the order, especially in the way he got out as well, looking for a big slug sweep off of Hemendra Ramdihal and got cleaned up. I just felt for maybe Patidin compared to Wasim Haslim, maybe prefer Wasim Haslim to go in there at number 3 to at least maybe maximize the power play, considering that was what Haslim had been doing or been attempting doing. That was his initial role in the squad. Patidin had been much more successful at the lower end, batting around Chandrapal Hemraj, constructing an innings, sending Patidin in at number 3, maybe with the mindset of looking to attack the power play and then playing a shot that probably he shouldn't have so early in the innings. I think that was certainly a result of the batting order being switched around a bit too much.
I talked about 4 spinners from Sharks: Hemendra Ramdihal, Lashman Bisra, Michael Sultan, and Tamish Prasad. They were always going to give you good 16 solid over if nothing goes wrong, which nothing didn't go wrong for them in the final. Did the spinners really took ascendancy here? Hemendra Ramdihal, Bisram, Michael Sultan, Tamish Prasad, and then later on, Karan C. Narayan came and mopped up things. Carl, what did you think about this spin attack?
Yeah, the spin attack, I think, suffocated the Demerara Eagles. It just, as much as, first of all, it was good spin bowling. The bowlers, they all bowled in the right areas. There was hardly anything loose, anything to latch onto. Sometimes you would see a bowler come and bowl 5 good balls and then give you that one bad ball to kind of release pressure. It was none of that. The ground fielding was good. And so the pressure just continued to build up. And as the pressure was building up, wickets were continually falling. And so as players came in, and Patterson, just coming back to Patterson for one quick moment in terms of where he batted in the order. I had a chat with him right afterwards. He was making the point that he felt like he needed to see more delivered. And even when he has been successful lower in the order, he felt almost like that wasn't really the best way he could contribute to the team. And so I think that factored into the decision with them kind of putting him up top. But then, as I said, just the continual, the spinners just coming at you. The Burbis, the Queen Sharks were relentless in that spin attack. And once there is no give in that attack, something has got to break. And it turned out to be the batting order of the Demerara Eagles. It effectively fell apart.
So a couple of catches again from Dominic Ricky. Mato, between the semi-final and this final, Dominic Ricky has snapped up about 4 or 5 catches by now, and they were all big wickets. Let's talk about Haslim and Avi Danpal. They find themselves in the middle. It's just the 8th over. They're batting a 5 for 40, and all of a sudden, they have 2 things to think of. One, make runs that will determine the chase here for the Sharks. And number 2, 66 balls remaining. What do they do?
Yeah, and I think they did the first part. They did the basic job right, and they managed to last 8 overs, exactly 8 overs. But yeah, just were unable to really up that scoring rate. But I feel Haslim and Danpal realized that they've got to carry on as long as possible, especially considering the batting options began to dwindle a bit after those 2. So yeah, I think Haslim and Danpal did a good job of weathering the storm. Haslim and Danpal both hitting a 6 each. But yeah, in the end, again, not really 18 and 16, not really innings of substance.
Yeah, and Carl and Matt, we were on comm. We wanted to see a good game. I don't know if it came across that probably we were backing the Eagles, but we wanted to see 120, 130 at least to have a good game. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And look, not only us, I think the park was full. It was almost standing room only in the park, and I think people came to see a good game as well.
Unless you were a hardcore shark fans, you don't care how you win. You want to win this thing.
True. But the neutrals wanted to see like a good cup final.
Yeah.
And you felt like that probably happened in the semifinal between the Berbice Lions and the Queen Sharks game. Probably in effect was probably a better game, was worthy of being a final in effect. But here it turned out that, as we talked about, the occupying the crease, Haslim and Danpal occupying the crease, that was a reasonably good strategy for the time that it lasted. But when you end up with Haslim with a 95 strike rate and Avi Danpal with like a 48 strike rate, it just tells you that just how tough the sledding was for them. They just couldn't get things going. And then once they fell, now you have new batters coming to the wicket, having to establish themselves, get set, and then trying to also advance the total, and they just couldn't get there. Even at the end, Mark Tyrrell came with a small cameo, but even that couldn't really put them into a position where an ultimate total would have been competitive, and it turned out not to be.
Yeah, can't blame them too much. They were reeling a 5 for 40, and so any rear guard action, whatever they needed to get, they had to get. Anything is better than nothing in the end. So 93 on the board, Matt. What do you make of that when Queen Shark?
Yeah, it was always going to be a mountain to climb for the Demerara Eagles at that point, especially considering this was a Sharks team that had just posted 150 mere hours earlier. And right away,
good start.
Right away, Chandrapal Hemraj got the wicket of Hamza Baig, and we felt just for a little bit that the Demerara Eagles would come out and really make the most out of this 93. But once again, Dominic Ricky and Talha Mumtaz. How good was Talha Mumtaz? The two of them continued to show their quality, continued to get the runs. 38 and 27, maybe not seeming like runs, but in a chase of 94, certainly some big knocks from them. And I feel things began to slip away for the Demerara Eagles quite quickly. And I think that really goes back to just, I guess, how the team looked, the composition of this Demerara side. From a bowling perspective, I said coming into the tournament, this was a team that I feel maybe lacked that genuine wicket-taking bowler. And they have some good options. Hemraj, Bechu, Tyrell, they've got a lot of all-rounders with Haslim, Derek Narayan. That's fine. But
Vidish was out.
Vidish Paul was their leading wicket taker throughout the round robin stage. He was nursing a shoulder injury that ruled him out for the last day. So that was a wicket taking option gone right there. And after Vidish Paul, Hemraj was good, and we saw Hemraj bowl was really their best bowler, 2 for 11 from his 4. But after that, I feel there just wasn't that bowler that really stood out for the Demerara Eagles. That was really a wicket taking option. Every single game would get 2-3 wickets. Tyrell wasn't that. Bechu wasn't that. Haslim wasn't that. They just didn't have that star bowler that would take 10, 11 wickets for the tournament, like we saw near the top of the most wickets column. Fuse Aziz was another option that had taken 3 wickets in the semi-final, and he didn't come into the attack until the game was pretty much over. So the top 3 wicket takers for this Demerara side was Vidish Paul, who was ruled out, Hemraj, who was their best bowler in the end, and Fuse Aziz, who only bowled 8 balls. And interestingly enough, took a wicket in those 8 balls, got the wicket of Hemendra Ramdi Hall. Yeah, after those 3, there just wasn't that genuine threat with the ball for the Demerara Eagles.
Yeah, and I actually asked Derek Narayan about the introduction of Fuse Aziz. It's a great point that he took 3 wickets in the semifinal and could hardly get an over in the final. And so he said that Derek Narayan said that he preferred, like the strategy was to go with slow bowling early on, and the slow bowling might have been the option to go. But then the third bowler they introduced was Mark Tyrell, and who is not a slow bowler. So had they probably gone for Fuse Aziz there, again, given how he bowled the 8 balls that he did, picking up a wicket and actually looking more of a danger, more of a wicket-taking option than Mark Tyrell did, it probably, in hindsight, and hindsight can be 20/20, in hindsight, the option of Mark Tyrell versus a Fuse Aziz perhaps may have helped the Demerara Eagles almost put themselves in a position where they couldn't really overcome the low total that they were defending. They just didn't give themselves a chance. And then in saying that too, I have to credit the performance from Dominic Rickey, Tala Mumtaz, as Matt mentioned. Mumtaz just had a tremendous tournament. Dominic Rickey with the bat seemed to always be there and thereabouts. But in the field, Dominic Rickey, I have to say just how well he played. He was vocal on the field, even when he wasn't in the high traffic areas. He always was. He was always communicating with whomever was there, telling them where to go, how to, where to position themselves, when to come in, when to stay out. And he ultimately actually walked away with the best fielder in the playoffs, winning that award. And it was well deserved by Dominic Rickey.
And just going back to Fuse Aziz, I think it's probably one of those things you go back to what is really a bowler's role in the team and how relative that role can be. Fuse Aziz was really a death bowler, a death specialist really throughout the tournament for the Demerara Eagles, and that's where he took a lot of his wickets operating near the end of the innings. But when 93 is the total on the board, every over is pretty much a death over. So to wait to introduce Fuse Aziz into the 15th over or whatever thereabout that they introduced him in, at that, when there's such a low total on the board, you've got to get, even if he's a death bowler by nature, you've got to get him into the attack early. But that being said, we have to credit the batting as well. Dominic Rickey, Talha Mumtaz, especially considering, again, second ball of the innings, Chandrapal Hemraj dismissed Hamza Beg for his ball. So the pressure was clearly on right from the get-go. But Mumtaz and Dominic Rickey, as they did throughout the tournament, did very well. Trevor Henry played a good hand as well, finished not out. But yeah, once again, I felt this Eagles team was a side on paper that was gonna beat you with their batting, if anything. And when the batting is only able to post 93, it was always going to be a tough challenge.
Yeah, I thought Vidishpal Singh was a big blow. Not only with his off spin mad, but he would have given the ball a tap.
Yeah.
That's a guy. I don't care if the score was 5 for 40 and he comes out, he plays shots.
Yeah.
He plays shots. I mean, in one of the games, he may have helped them got across the line when they needed some quick runs. So he was certainly a big blow for this team. But in the end, by now, Carl, it was becoming apparent that the Queen Sharks are gonna do something very difficult in 2025.
Yeah, that's the three-peat. That's a term coined by Pat Riley, coach of the Los Angeles Lakers of the National Basketball Association. And all along we were saying, hey, it could happen if the Queens Sharks were going to be denied of this three-peat, it probably would have been at the hands of the Berbice Lions. And when it didn't happen there, coming into the final, you had to have you were under the impression that it was sort of a formality. And then when only 93 runs were posted, it even seemed like a more certain formality. And then ultimately, in fairness, they struggled a bit in a sense. They got to their target in 18.2 overs, so it really wasn't a walk in the park per se, but I think it's sort of the approach that they took, a more deliberate approach.
Yeah.
Even from Tala Mumtaz, he got 38 from 57 balls, which is very uncharacteristic of him, and that just again speaks to the fact that they were more deliberate, very content to just take the ones and twos and not necessarily go for the big shots, and ensuring that they got over the line and caught that three-peat, that all-important Triple Crown, making history in the Guyana Cup.
Okay, quick question for both of you guys, Matt and Carl. Would the Essequibo Jaguars provided a better opposition in the final, you say, to Queen's Shark?
Well, in hindsight, you would have to say yes, because the hindsight is 2020. And the Jaguars had played so well throughout the tournament. You know, they were a top seed coming in. And look, you can have a bad game here or there, which and they're, we've always talked about, and we said this on comms. When you're in a tournament, in tournament play, if you're going to play a bad game, the earlier in the tournament you have that game and get it out of your system, it's the better it is for you. And so in the case of the Queen Sharks, they lost the game very early on, and so if you're going to lose, you lose early. But to have like the performance that the Jaguars did at that very late juncture, I think that was their undoing. And had they gotten that game out of their system, so to speak, I think it would have set up for a more competitive final for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, it's certainly tough to tell. The Essequibo Jaguars did have two informed batters, the likes of Abdullah Saeed and Tristan Coleman, who were in good form. And again, as you mentioned, both of them had their failures come in that semifinal. So it would be tough to tell. I think batting wise, on paper, the Jaguars and the Eagles, I think were pretty even when you look at their batting talent. The Jaguars were another team that really had a lot of reliance on Coleman and Abdullah to get them runs. We saw Kevin Christian, Nicholas Chinku got runs in the semi, but prior to that, the batting probably wasn't as strong as it could have been, aside from Coleman and Abdullah. So kind of similar to what we saw from the Eagles. Bowling wise, yeah, a bit different. They did have Karim Chandramanarayan, David Lachaya, Keith Eddy, who did take quite a few wickets throughout the tournament. So maybe you could say the bowling from a statistical standpoint was probably better than the Demerara Eagles. But still, it was going to take something really extravagant and a really well put together side, firing on all cylinders to knock off the Queen Sharks. And I feel both the Demerara Eagles and Essequibo Jaguars had a few gaps in their team that the Queen Sharks simply didn't.
All right, folks. So there you have it. Queen Shark winning 3 in a row from 2020, 2023, 2024, and then 2025. They'll be looking ahead for 2026. Well, they'll be defending their Triple Crown, guys. Queen Shark could be eyeing another tournament in 2026. Overall, I think it was a really good tournament put together.
And before we wrap things up, one thing I want to commend the Queen Sharks for is that this is a much different team than what we saw from the previous 2 years. They had Christopher Barnwell previously. They had Bhaskar Yadram previously. Raymond Ramratan previously. Saiteja Mukamala last year. Ronaldo Mohammed last year. Neil Smith. They had several guys, and in the case of Yadram and Ramratan and Neil Smith, guys that left the Sharks and represented other franchises this year. They were without a lot of their main marquee players and still were able to pull this off with pretty much...
That included some of their...
Yeah, they were able to win the three-peat and complete another victory with pretty much an exclusively local team. Obviously, the additions of Mumtaz and Hamza Beg proved to be very good additions, and hopefully, in the case of Talha Mumtaz especially, was dominated tournament. He has probably cemented himself a spot next year already.
Yeah, I think it was a very good tournament put together. The Guyana Cup, it was up to good level. I think the logistic of the tournament ran pretty well. I didn't hear any complaint about teams having to go back and forth of their grounds. The tournament spanned ground from Marine Park to 223rd and in between. And I didn't hear any complaint. All the matches went off on time. The weather was good. And I think New York National League should really be commended for putting on a very, very good Guyana Cup. Very impressive showing. And one of the things, guys, what I've noticed, because the New York National League can run a tournament like this called the Guyana Cup exclusively because they control a vast majority of many of the players that play in this tournament. Let's say moving ahead, let's say they want to extend the tournament to 10 teams or 12 teams. Although in my opinion, I think you should keep it at 8 because more teams may dilute the strength of the teams. But I'm just saying if probably they want to go to 10 teams going forward, New York National League can literally take off a weekend from their National League and play a Guyana Cup weekend. And it will not affect the league because the league is the Guyana Cup. The Guyana Cup is the league because predominantly all the players that took part in this Guyana Cup belongs to the National League, which is really a strength for the New York National League, Carl.
It is. The New York National League is turning out to be the premier league, at least in the New York tri-state region. A bunch of the other leagues that have been around for quite some time have been having some challenges, and the New York National League has grown from strength to strength. A number of teams from other leagues have sort of consolidated into the New York National League. So the thrust of the players, of the top quality players, are there, and it underscores the point that you're making, man. And one unrelated but related item before we wrap is the fact that this tournament was actually played in honor of Milton Paidana. For those who know, Milton Paidana was a Guyanese cricketer who represented the West Indies in 3 one-day internationals. Pai was one of the top wicketkeeper batsmen that came out of the Caribbean. And the championship final, the trophy was named in his honor and presented. And so kudos to the New York National League, the administrative team, Ramesh, Arunasalam, and his broader team, Samuel Mahabir and others, for having the foresight to think of a good way to honor Milton Paidana. His family came out and were very receptive. They were they were overwhelmed by just the love that the fans and the spectators on the ground showed in the league honoring, and in the Guyana Cup honoring Pai in that way. And so I want to also underscore the fact that Pai will be sorely missed in these parts. He had been around the New York tri-state region for the latter part of his life, just helping to give back to the game through coaching and through helping the youngsters come through. And so kudos to the New York National League for that gesture.
And Carl, it's only fitting that Baisley Pond Park was his home. Was Paidana's home. That's where his club is, and that's where he did his coaching stuff. So it was only fitting that we were at Baisley Pond Park.
Yep.
Yeah, Matt, your thoughts on?
Yeah, once again, the quick thinking to honor Paidana through the Guyana Cup, naming the final after him was certainly a very good step. As you mentioned, yeah, he played a big part, especially around Baisley Pond Park. Was almost every event that was at Baisley Pond Park, National League related or not, Milton Paidana was usually in attendance, right by the trailer. That was usually a spot a lot of the times.
Well, I guess what? If you are in the Caribbean and you own grounds, maybe that side would have been my Milton Paidana side.
Yeah. if Baisley Pond Park had gotten some stands, without a doubt, any stand in that vicinity would have been called the Milton Paidana stand. But yeah, it was somebody that always liked to spend time, always come out anytime Baisley Pond Park had an event. It was always a man that was in attendance.
And he had a little crew over there, and he had Sarge Lorenzo Williams, Steve Fleischman, Glenn Hurley. They all kind of just congregated. Even Joe Suharak sometimes, they all just kind of congregated right by that container, and that was their place. People knew when they came to the park, don't sit over there because that's where Pai and his crew sit. That's their stand, and so that's the little VIP section when you walk into Baisley Pond Park. And it's gonna be a different atmosphere with Pai not there, but it was a good gesture again to honor him in a way that his family could appreciate, and that the fans and spectators who were there and know Pai could also appreciate.
Yeah, Carl, on behalf of the New York National League, want to thank all the teams for being a part of something big, something well run. I did see quite a few of the games. Every team was impeccably put in uniforms. Nobody played with any other clothes except there were some chilly days.
Yeah,
a guy would have throw something on, but other than that, every team was well uniformed. The umpires were good. The grounds were well taken care of. And I tell you, this Guyana Cup was very good this year. The weather was good. Not a day was lost, Matt.
Yeah, and I was just going to make that point. We've had previous years have had quite a few interruptions. Last year was certainly turned into a bit of a mess with the weather. Usually around Memorial Weekend is not the best. Thankfully this year it stayed away.
Yeah, and this was a top level tournament. This is the best we have in this tri-state area. And so it doesn't get bigger than this, folks, around here. And so kudos to the New York National League for presenting a grand and well put together Guyana Cup. Carl, your final thoughts, and we're out.
Yeah, kudos again to the organizing committee and the teams that came together to put on a wonderful festival of cricket starting on Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It culminated with really good cricket on what we call Championship Day, and we need more tournaments of this nature in the New York tri-state area to, again, continue to bring the fans out, continue to elevate the game, and to continue to build and grow the cricket in the U.S. And congratulations to everyone involved.
So on behalf of the entire crew and everybody who worked to put the Guyana Cup together, the New York National League, Ramesh and Samuel Mahabir, we want to say thank you for a well put together tournament and look forward for a bigger year in 2026.